Now, DNS has been around for a very long time, and outside of the Microsoft world, most of DNS still stores its files in what are really plain text, human readable files. In fact, if we take a look here on our server and we go to C Windows System 32 and then the DNS subfolder here in that DNS subfolder, if I go right here, will be the contents of the different zone files that we've created, along with all the different records that are included in those zone files. So if I go to company.pri.dns, for example, and attempt to open it in Notepad, you'll see, well, here is essentially the zone file. This is all the contents of that zone. And so Microsoft actually, as it's going about adding new A records or other types of records into the zone, it just simply adds them here to the bottom end of the zone file in the appropriate format. Well, as I said, DNS has been around for a long time, and so these zone files in text format are great, and we have a mechanism to replicate them around. We've seen an example of that when we created our secondary over here. It's essentially a file copy that happens from primary to secondary. But this process can get a little bit more challenging as we begin to expand the number of DNS servers we have. Further, because we already have this Active Directory solution and all the replication that's built into creating that Active Directory solution, it may actually be a better idea for us not to use some separate mechanism for replicating these records around, but instead to just bake the zone into Active Directory itself. Now, this process gets us a couple of different cool things. Number one, by moving to Active Directory, we can better control how it gets migrated around. And number two, with Active Directory integration, we can support a little bit of extra security in this dynamic updates thing we were talking about before. Let me come back over here to our company.pri zone here, and I want to bring open the properties of the zone so that we can take a look at the zone type that we created a minute ago. That was of type primary. We could, if we want, change the zone type here from a primary zone to an Active Directory integrated zone. Now, you can only do this if the DNS server is also a domain controller, and that's a fairly common configuration across all the environments I've been involved with. If I store that zone in Active Directory, we will make the zone Active Directory integrated, and then we can choose how we want to get this zone replicated around to the different DNS servers or domain controllers in the domain. With this zone now Active Directory integrated, I could configure it to replicate to all the DNS servers on all the domain controllers in company.pri. I could do so for all the DNS servers running on domain controllers in the forest, which is also company.pri. I could do this to all the domain controllers in the domain, or I could even create a custom directory partition to define specifically where I want these things to actually replicate to. I'll choose just the default here for replication because I want to show you that back up here, after I go through completing that, I can create a directory partition by right-clicking on DC and choosing to create that default application directory partition. Doing so would allow me to define specific DNS servers that also happen to be domain controllers that I would want to replicate this zone file to. Now, in the real world, you don't see this happening all too often, but I don't know about you, this giant if-then statement that we're talking about here with Active Directory partition replication just seems like one of those off-the-wall questions you could find on an exam. So, whereas, again, I don't think you'd probably use this in a lot of production environments, it's one thing that just seems like an awesome thing to get tested against. Now, as I said, that when we go through actually doing this Active Directory integration for zones, we get another big benefit, which is that added security for dynamic updates. If I come here under Properties and then I take a look at the Dynamic Updates tab here, you'll notice that previously we were allowing both non-secure and secure dynamic updates, which, as you can see here, is a security vulnerability because there's no way of authenticating an incoming client, meaning that any client could just say, hey, give me a DNS record, and then have an authoritative record in that DNS zone. Once we're Active Directory integrated, we can shift this now to secure only, which ensures then that only clients that participate in Active Directory can participate also in DNS dynamic updates. I'd want to do the same thing down here on the secondary file as well, so my reverse lookup zone down here, or not the secondary, but the reverse lookup zone, to convert that zone from primary to Active Directory integrated. And then also, once I've done that, then change over here from non-secure and secure to secure only. The third big benefit about doing Active Directory integration is that I need no longer have this primary-secondary approach to how the zones are replicated around. With Active Directory integration, all zones are always writable, and so there's no need to have a bunch of non-writable secondary zones and only a single location, the primary zone, where those records can get updated. Down here under DC2, Once I've made that conversion up on the top with the original zone, I could potentially come back here under Properties and then change this type from secondary back to primary and Active Directory integrated in order to now have a multi-master model, not only for Active Directory, but also for DNS.